This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. So, recapping a story we've been covering all morning, of course, the terrorist attack in Manhattan. A Uzbekistan national in this country since 2010 through the diversity lottery green card program, if you will. Trump tweeting about it this morning saying, I want merit-based, not the diversity-based. He's in this country, rents a truck from Home Depot, takes off on a bike path next to the Hudson River, kills 8, injures 11, yelling Allahu Akbar while mowing people down. Thankfully, he flees on foot. Thankfully, a heroic New York City police officer stops him, shoots him in the abdomen. He's expected to survive, and that's what we know.
And he fled on foot because he ended crashing into a school bus where there are 2 adults on that school bus, 2 children. All 4 of those individuals are still hospitalized this morning. But it's just... He was married in 2013 to a woman from Ohio, had a Tampa, Florida driver's license on him, but recently had been living in Paterson, New Jersey as an Uber driver.
And, of course, then in the wake of that carnage, you get the pro forma statements from the pro forma politicians like New York City Mayor de Blasio.
We know that this action was intended to break our spirit. But we also know New Yorkers are strong, New Yorkers are resilient, and our spirit will never be moved by an act of violence, an act meant to intimidate us. We have been tested before as a city very near the site of today's tragedy, and New Yorkers do not give in the face of these kinds of actions.
Well, in fact, arguably from a policy perspective, that's exactly what's happened, is politicians like de Blasio giving in to the terrorists. Chris Cuomo, governor, was on CNN Fox Business this morning with Maria Bartiromo. He had this to say.
We do have to be smart and intelligent about who we let into the country. There's no doubt about that. I think we have to be even smarter with our policing. We have to evolve along with them and gathering intelligence. But at the end of the day, the truth is also this. New York is a target. We have a Statue of Liberty in our harbor who holds a torch that says freedom and democracy, and that is repugnant to a whole group of people who want to knock that torch down. So they are...
Yeah, we want to knock the torch down?
No,
because we want to...
No, the terrorists. He's
right, I know,
yeah.
But still...
Well, fair enough, but he kind of, yes, we need to be smart about who we let into this country. Okay, well, what specific policy change would you like to see then? If we're going to win and we're not just going to accept this as the new normal, then that means we need to make some changes. Mm-hmm. And law enforcement is a reactive institution, not a proactive institution. Policymakers is supposed to be proactive. Law enforcement largely, I mean, yes, intelligence and so forth, but largely is reactive. And their authority is limited by what civilian political authorities decide. So I'd like to focus on what civilian political authorities are and are not doing with respect to the policy regime under which law enforcement has to operate. And for more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined again by our friend Lieutenant Colonel Jeff Addicott, former JAG officer, now the director of the Center for Terrorism Law. Colonel Addicott, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure.
So your reaction to the response about we need to, law enforcement needs to be more sophisticated. We need to do more on truck rentals to chasing that. We need to put more bollards up in public spaces to block trucks. Are we treating symptoms and not the underlying policy problem?
Well, you are. I mean, the politicians are doing their rhetoric as usual because they don't want to accept any responsibility. The fact is that under that particular mayor, he has cut back on human intelligence, and that's the best type of intelligence, and that is, getting undercover agents into these areas that are radicalized and gathering information. This act, to us, it's an act of terror, an act of murder. To them, it's an act of worship. I mean, this is motivated by what we call radical Islam. And while it's certainly true that the vast majority of Muslims have nothing to do with this, the Wahhabists, the Salafites, that's where this stuff comes from. Now, not all Wahhabists are going to kill, but that's where they emanate from. So you've got to identify who these people are. You've got to use the word radical Islam and stop this lone wolf stuff. These aren't lone wolves. They're all attached by the same religious ideology of radical Islam. A lone wolf is someone that has no connection to anybody or anything. They're usually a disgruntled employee, and they simply snap. These aren't lone wolves, and we will have other attacks against the homeland by these jihadists.
And that's exactly what Cuomo called him, too, a lone wolf.
Yeah, and that's what you hear the news media, they pick up on that line. Oh, the lone wolf did it. Like this, will never happen again. It doesn't happen. It will happen again. And they're not lone wolves. That's a bastardization of the term to cover up who the enemy is.
Well, the 29-year-old, he's from Uzbekistan, which is a majority Muslim nation. But what do we know? They're not on our watch. They're not on the travel ban list. That country's not. Should it be put on the travel ban, or what? How should we handle this?
Yeah, that's an issue that the president has to decide. Certainly, any country that is Sharia law based, or any country that has a large minority of these jihadists that emanate from these areas, have to have special screening, special scrutiny. But I would certainly get rid of this absurd, lottery, diversity motivated country where if you match a certain country or skin color or whatever it is, we're going to let you in. I want to let people in. I don't care about their skin color. I care about what can you offer this country. That should be the criteria, merit-based, not diversity, political correctness-based.
A lot of discussion since 9/11 from President Bush to Obama to now Trump about safe havens when describing our activities in North Africa, in the Middle East, in Central Asia to disrupt terrorist networks. Do we have a problem with safe havens in this country with sanctuary cities and politicians like de Blasio and other big city mayors who are sort of speaking out of both sides of their mouth?
Yeah, I mean, again, the vast majority of Muslims have nothing to do with this, but we do know there is a profile. And so we have things that we need to look for. And again, that's a larger question where you have states violating federal law. And, that cannot be allowed in our country. I mean, you follow federal law. And to ignore the law is a dangerous thing. We operate by the rule of law. And, of course, we've been ignoring the rule of law about border security for quite some time. And we need politicians that are willing to make laws, and we need the executive branch that's willing to enforce the law.
Why do you think he chose that location? I mean, in Greenwich Village, they had a huge Halloween parade last night. You have the New York City Marathon this Sunday. Why so close to the World Trade Center?
Well, obviously, this has a history, and that particular area, of course, is where many of the 9/11 hijackers would meet and congregated and talk about the plot that they were going to do. It's a large Muslim majority area, and again, the vast majority of Muslims have nothing to do with this, but somebody knows about this guy. Now, he's in New York for 3 months, but New York's always a popular target. Jihadists have tried to attack New York many times since 9/11. Zazi, the car bomb, they just haven't been able to kill people. And so it's a popular target. I mean, New York's always been on the high priority list for the jihadists.
One of the things I'd just like to get your reaction to is sort of the false moral equivalences that are made, not just, which I shouldn't say moral, magnitude of threat, false magnitude of threat comparisons that are made. Like Peter Beinart writing in The Atlantic today, the attack in Manhattan poses a test for Donald Trump, and the test is, can he resist the temptation to, according to Beinart, to focus on the fact that the terrorist driver of that truck was a radical Islamist and call him as such, and he compares this to Trump being silent when an African-American was stabbed in a racially motivated attack in March in New York, and a white supremacist stabbed an African-American man in College Park, Maryland in May, and a murder of an Indian American outside Kansas City. And and so forth. He goes on to kind of, he's trying to say the threat posed by white supremacists, people that engage in acts of depravity that have a different racial makeup, profile, victim. Why don't they get the same coverage, same response from the president that this will get? And isn't that just like a silly, false order of magnitude comparison?
Well, it's silly because of the fact the number one terror threat is not, does not emanate from those sources. Certainly right-wing extremists, left-wing extremists, which we just mentioned, the left-wing extremists that commit violence, they use terror, and then criminal nut jobs use terror, like in Vegas. And we haven't got to the bottom of that yet. But the number one threat by far, in a way, is radical Islam. That's where we declared a war on terror, and that is a term that points towards radical Islam. The president can't, talk about every single threat every time a threat pops up. That's absurd. And so you have one person killed here, one person killed there. You have black individuals that kill also white individuals. The president doesn't speak about that every time it occurs.
Right.
It's just a matter of magnitude. The number one threat, and this is not even close, is radical Islam. If you look at all the statistics, the DOJ and who they prosecute and who the FBI investigates, it's radical Islam.
Yeah, well said. He is Colonel Jeff Addicott, Director for the Center of Terrorism Law, former Army JAG officer. Colonel Addicott, thanks so much for joining us again. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's what